Listen, I'm like a First Amendment cuck. Maybe that's my problem. Colleges are supposed to be challenging. Universities are supposed to be challenging. Now, what occurred with some of the protests, absolutely out of control. I don't agree with Hamas. I'm the first to say that, but it's like, it's crazy in my mind that we would give any benefit of the doubt to this administration in terms of free speech. I mean, he's in court right now suing Ann Selzer over a poll that he disagreed with. It's absurd, and it's one more attack, and this is one that affects people in a more provocative way. These are green card holders, and there's no process. Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description. Do you want me to give a little background, or would you like to give some background on what's happening?
Yeah. No, I'd like to know, because look, you're the lawyer on this. You may not be a constitutional lawyer, but you're certainly more trained on this than I am. So yeah, like what's the situation? I saw this thing pop up, and I have some preliminary understanding of what could happen. I don't really know what's going to happen, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so there was news earlier today that a student who goes to Columbia, which right now is, as I'm sure you're aware, the epicenter of controversy with respect to demonstrations on campus in favor of Palestine, some might say in favor of Hamas. I think we should start this by saying I hate Hamas, and I think, Avi, you know that. I'm not a fan of terrorists. I'm certainly not a fan of Islamists, and I think that Hamas has immiserated the people in Gaza, and I think the polling even in Gaza reflects that reality. So I am no fan, no friend of Hamas. If you knew me in college, you knew I was writing very critically of all this kind of like, left-wing liberal downplaying of Islamic extremist terrorists.
You don't need to convince me that
I have to virtue signal, though. I know not you.
Yes.
So all that put to the side. So the news is that at Columbia, this one student who maybe is a ringleader of some kind, I'm not 100% clear on the amount of his participation. It's something we'll talk about, and I'm sure we'll play around with some hypotheticals, but that he had a role in the protests, either that occurred, a lot of which got out of control, some of which I would say are plausibly called insurrections. We had those conversations before as well, and which obviously are a source with this administration, which is, I think, takes a very, very pro-Israel stance. We were just waiting for other shoes to drop. They've already dropped funding, like $400 million or so from Columbia's funding, and now they're taking more direct action vis-a-vis immigration for students on certain types of visas. And what's most controversial thing about this instance is they're purporting to rescind green cards on the basis of support for Hamas.
Now, so it's not just a visa; it's a green card.
Right. It's It's for lawful permanent residence, and a green card is it's not a legal term, but it's referring to what it used to look like, the actual a legal permanent resident. Correct. Yep. An LPR. And so those individuals, according to the Secretary of State, who there are a lot of different actors in constellation that affect immigration. The Department of Justice oversees the Executive Office for Immigration Review. So the Attorney General sits at the head of an agency that kind of oversees a lot of defensive immigration stuff, passes rules and regulations. Obviously, Department of Homeland Security, they're in charge of the three main organizations that are specific to immigration, Customs and Border Protection, USCIS, and ICE. And then you have the Department of State, which Marco Rubio heads, which obviously also has involvement vis-a-vis consular processing of visas from abroad and just interactions with other states and obviously like foreign terrorist organizations. And so it would make sense for Marco Rubio to announce a policy of the administration with respect to this shift, which is, as I just stated, anyone who voices support for Hamas or who supports Hamas in Marco Rubio's terms, and we can pull up the tweet, is going to have their green card rescinded.
Right. Now, now it's important, because if he says voices support for Hamas, he said anyone who voices support for Hamas, it would be a lot.
Let me pull up the tweet so that I am not misquoting him. Yeah. You and me we love specifics, so let's not start. Go ahead. Sorry.
Supporters, Hamas supporters.
Right.
We wrote him Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported, and he didn't say any Hamas supporters. He just said it was under the quantification was underspecified. And he didn't say it's voice support. He said Hamas supporters.
So it's
pretty vague.
Pretty vague, and just and I'll let you talk. Sorry, vagueness is a specific and a special concern for First Amendment issues because of a fear of chilling speech, and precisely one of the reasons why, for example, we might take issue on First Amendment grounds for a broad law that may be lawful in some applications, but it's construed enough, or there's enough, discretion in there that it could affect lawful speech. We might, view that with more suspicion or scrutiny because First Amendment have these kind of special concerns with chilling lawful speech. And so that's why vagueness, even constitutionally, is recognized as a particular problem with respect to the First Amendment.
Right. And just for me and learning, is there like a specific definition for chilling speech?
I think that definition would be to disincentivize lawful speech on the basis of I don't know if it would be an otherwise legal, but just chilling lawful speech. I think. Oh, sorry. That's circular. Disincentivizing lawful speech.
Okay, so basically the vagueness is being used to because it may capture some instances of unlawful speech.
Yep.
The concern is that the vagueness would also capture instances of lawful speech as a means of disincentivizing it.
Correct. And I just to be clear, I'm highlighting that as a potential concern. Right now, we're a little bit in the dark, and so because we don't necessarily have like a full-throated policy, I imagine maybe we'll see like a memo somewhere or some kind of enforcement guidelines or maybe even an executive action which specifies with greater clarity what's going on, and that we can examine with a fine-tooth comb. But I'm just raising vagueness as a particular concern when it comes to First Amendment issues.
Right. Understood. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, because I mean, when I started learning about this and this individual, my first initial take was that, like, if you just want to tag this guy with a crime and deport him, it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, he clearly violated certain laws. Just charge him with any one of those things and revoke whatever you revoke on the basis of that, or something. However it works.
There's a reason why they don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. But they could do that. I mean, it's pretty clear that at the minimum he trespassed.
So the criminal bases. So one of the difficulties with the crime stuff is, so there's these two different lines when it comes to immigration for people in different postures. So people who are presenting themselves for inspection and admission are judged under criteria known as inadmissibility standards. So when you're presenting yourself at a border of entry, and sometimes this is extended to kind of situations where you've crossed the border illegally, and we have this kind of like pretend situation where you're presenting yourself for being admitted, even though you are technically still in the country. But there's specific grounds for inadmissibility that could lead to your deportation under the grounds of inadmissibility. But people who have already been inspected and admitted, such as green card holders, they're subject to a different set of standards called deportability. They overlap a lot. This is a nuance that I'm providing for you. It actually is relevant in this case. But
because it's not a visa, it's green card. So just quick question: Would inadmissibility apply to visas but not green cards, but then deportability apply to green cards but not visas?
No, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So grounds for inadmissibility apply to people who have not been inspected and admitted into the country. So if your example,
okay, so both visas and green cards.
Yeah. So, and there are certain conditions under which returning green card holders can also be subject to the grounds for inadmissibility. But basically, you can think of the grounds of inadmissibility generally applying to individuals who are presenting themselves at a border to get into the country, and it usually excludes green card holders, who are usually always subject to the deportability grounds, except for certain cases where you're abroad. There's a lot of complications and nuances here, but think of the inadmissibility grounds generally as applying to you coming into the country or constructively coming into the country if you cross the border illegally within the country, and then the grounds of deportability for people who have already like been cleared as an initial matter. So you can, if you're a tourist visa and you've been inspected and admitted, there might be grounds for deportability of you once you've, let's say, extended beyond your visa stay, but you'd be subject to the grounds of deportability in general, with a lot of caveats that I don't have time to get into every one of them. But I'll tell you why those nuances matter in a second. But needless to say,
the criteria are presumably more broad or more criteria more liberal on inadmissibility than deportability.
Typically, yes, but as with everything, it's complicated. Sometimes there are certain grounds that are more liberal or more broad in deportability, but in general, yes, the grounds for inadmissibility are broader, and you'd rather be in the deportability world. One of the ways in which it's broader, I'll just give you an example, is the criminal grounds of inadmissibility and the criminal grounds of deportability. The criminal grounds of inadmissibility do not require a criminal conviction. It requires either you to have a criminal conviction or to admit to the crime. So there's an important caveat: admit to the crime or admit to the essential elements of the crime. So that's one way in which it's broader, right? It's because you don't have to be.
You don't need a court to
exactly.
Gotcha.
Whereas the grounds of criminal deportability, you're going to need a conviction. It's not enough for you to have an allegation or for you even to admit to the essential elements of the crime, even as an admission, for you to be subject to the criminal ground of deportability. If, let's, for example, you're a green card holder. So that's one area in which that nuance matters. But it's all to say that even with the criminal grounds of inadmissibility, there's a showing that has to be done, and you're subject to certain rights and procedures. If you're, for example, being charged as removable, let's say charged as inadmissible or charged as deportable, the burden of proof is on the government. Burden of proof is on the government to show that you are removable as charged. And that's true both for deportability and inadmissibility, and it applies at its height to people with green cards.
Okay, so it's still the burden of proof on the government, even if you're coming into the country and you want to do inadmissibility.
Yes,
it's not the other way.
Yes, you could think of once you're not in the country, there's probably different spheres of rights. There is actually some ambiguity about when your rights start. If you come to the border without presenting any papers or without having any ground to enter the country, there are more summary procedures known as expedited removal procedures. But there's also wholesale, right now Trump has stopped all asylum across the southern border for people who aren't at a port of entry. And so that is a summary removal that's even beyond the scope of expedited removal under the law. But in general, yes, the burden of proof is going to be on the government to show that you are removable as inadmissible. You could think of maybe there's a difference in terms of someone at the border being rejected as opposed to someone being removed. And so you might not have to go through all the procedures to just, turn them away, as opposed to once they're in the country, pushing them out, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Yes. So in this case, the government essentially they would have to show, I guess we could get into that. They would have to show some sort of criminal activity, the burden of proof being on them, like a conviction, crime of moral turpitude or something.
Yep. CIMT, it's called crime involving moral turpitude.
And what is that subset of crime? What does that cover? What are crimes not of moral turpitude?
There's a deal of case law that right now, as I sit here, I don't have a perfect command of, but crimes involving moral turpitude, it really goes, it's kind of this standard that has to be interpreted through case law over time. But things you might think of theft, robbery, murder, assault type crimes, those are typically going to be CIMTs, things that are more, maybe there's a technical criminal violation for you to turn right on red or something. I wouldn't imagine that's a crime involving moral turpitude, but I don't have a full command of that, but you can look up.
I guess the question here in this case, as it relates to because at minimum he clearly was trespassing. So would that fall under crime of moral turpitude, or at least I don't think
that a mere criminal trespass would suffice probably as a CIMT. Maybe it could count as a burglary if he's in Colombia with intention to do another felony in there, but then you need to show the other kind of underlying felony. If he's maybe directing people to do other crimes or is in a conspiracy to deprive Colombia of access permanently or for some significant period of time.
If they were in the involved take over one of the buildings or something.
Right, yeah. But then the reason I have such a big problem with that, the issue wouldn't be removing their green card because they support Hamas. It would be removing them because they did a crime. And then I'm okay, yes, I expect Biden to be removing people or rescinding their benefits or making them deportable on the basis of their criminal activity. That's fine with me.
Of course. And so when I first, and that's getting back to when I first saw this, I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. So why are they going for this broader thing now? Because it's if the goal was just him, I mean, the goal is obviously more than just him. Because if the goal is just him, I think it would be rather easy to make the case that he committed a crime of moral turpitude and just go through whatever process, and they probably would get the conviction they're looking for.
But that's what they want to do is they want to chill dissent and people who are angry at the state of situation in Israel. And so just like with the money situation, just like what they're doing with DEI, what they're doing is they're doing select enforcement actions and announcing broad sweeping policies with the hope, as they have been successful with DEI and they're going to be successful here, to make people be scared to protest against the administration or against the Israel's actions. I think that's what's going on here. And so it's not, I don't take them at good faith that they're just trying to apply, because if they really were worried about this one individual and what a danger he is, then they would, charge him with a CIMT. They might not even have, the federal government might not have jurisdiction, so it might be out of their hands. It might be up to this, New York State, in which case you're screwed. That's just the law. But yeah, that's my take on it.
But I guess any crimes related to terrorism would be in the federal government's.
True. Another additional complication. There are specific subsets for terrorism-linked conduct that are their own thing as well. But usually they apply to you when you're abroad or you're in some way. And I guess this will kind of ground out into the same kind of First Amendment analysis in a way. If you're like conspiring with or communicating with a foreign terrorist organization or giving material benefit, let's say, to a foreign terrorist organization.
Yes.
Those are situations in which there could be additional grounds beyond the criminal grounds of admissibility and deportability, terrorism related grounds of inadmissibility and deportability. But it's the same issue, which is if that's at issue, then it's up to the government to, in my opinion, and maybe that's what they're doing, right? They've arrested him. I'm assuming they're going to charge him as removable. The burden is going to be on them to show that. And so maybe there is some smoking gun for this one kid, but that's not what Rubio said. And what Rubio is implying is, if you are a supporter, or at least he's leaving open as a possibility.
Yes, it's the connotation and the denotation. Because the only way I could really make sense of the denotation is by supporters, that he would be talking about conditions that meet the criteria of material support to terrorist to foreign terrorist organizations.
That would be something under current law that might be acceptable, but
yes, with the Holder versus Humanitarian Law Project in 2010, that would be the case.
Yeah, but there, right? Like you'd have to show that there's some kind of connection between it can't be independent advocacy. In other words, it would have to be, you have to show at least some amount of communication or coordination separate and apart from independent advocacy. Now, you might ask the question, how independent do we mean by independent? In my opinion, what it should be, and what I read the court as saying in Holder, is coordination on the level of communication between those. I mean, what was being proposed there was really organizations that wanted to talk to the PKK and some other group, and that wanted to interface with the PKK, and specifically to tailor their advocacy in conjunction with the PKK. And they were very clear, like, no one is talking about stifling any kind of independent advocacy, independent stuff. So if this guy never talked to anyone in Hamas or who he thought was in Hamas, if all he's doing is taking Hamas's cues, I think he's doing no more nor less than what like all these Russian bots are doing on Twitter when they're taking Putin's line, or what the president's doing.
So it wouldn't cover mere. Well, I think we would both be in agreement that Holder wouldn't cover mere abstract cheerleading for Hamas.
Correct. I would use the term independent advocacy, which is to suggest
independent advocacy. Sure. So you can say, so for example, if someone is basically doing what I commonly do on Twitter, which is look at data about misinformation against Israel and debunk it or whatever. If someone's like doing that independently in favor of Hamas, that wouldn't, even though that is benefiting them in some sense, which
100%, just like Tim Pool is benefiting Russia. Yes. If you look,
right, but they are not, exactly, but they're not providing. It wouldn't constitute, the mere independent advocacy is not the sort of thing that would constitute an independent. That would not constitute material support to a foreign terrorist organization
in the way that was at issue at in Holder. Yeah, I think that that's right, and I think that that's like I'm even okay with some of these lines. Like I'm okay with. I'm not so sure how much that framework would work within the United States itself. I think that I would be very skeptical of someone trying to apply that, for example, to the KKK. Right? Let's say that the United States says in America the KKK is a designated terrorist organization, and so you can't provide any legal advice to the KKK within the United States. Right? That to me would raise a bunch of issues that I'm not sure. Just as this is my intuition or my ethics, I guess, but also my intuition about what the law is. I think that there's less First Amendment rights, and I would say no First Amendment rights for foreign organizations. And so I am happy to
So yeah, because they said foreign terrorist organizations,
right.
But the KKK wouldn't be a foreign terrorist organization.
Yeah. So I'm okay having that line as being a kind of bright line, and I'm okay even with somewhat. I mean, some aspects of the Holder decision trouble me a little bit, but I'm okay with there being like, okay, we've designated these organizations as so bad that any support to them, money's fungible. Any support for them is unacceptable. So you can't interface with them in any respect. And it's kind of what we do with Russian sanctions, right? We say you can't do business with the state of Russia or its oligarchs because of their invasion of Ukraine. And in principle, I don't have that much of a problem with that. But I think the connection to that organization, the direct connection between the person, who's uttering that phrase or the slogan or whatever, that matters to me, because once that goes away, really, like, Trump ran on a lack of orthodoxy with a lot of foreign policy decisions and is currently operating outside of an orthodoxy that existed pre-Trump and with respect to his allies and the different alliances. And so I think that's just, it's making a rod for our own back in that everyone's going to think that domestic people are in hock with some foreign organization, or that they know better over who's a terrorist and who's not a terrorist. And at that point, it just becomes, anyone can silence anyone based on a change in administration, and that I don't like.
So I think in this case, at least my understanding was that what was said was that he led. What was the exact quote? Something that he was aligned. Activities aligned with, what was it? He led activities aligned to Hamas, is what they're saying. They arrested him for. Now I don't know what aligned. Well, they're going to have to really specify aligned. Like, does that mean he just cheerleaded for Hamas? Does that mean he just advocated for Hamas, or does that mean that something which you could dial in material support to? And what I've been seeing is those official Hamas pamphlets. I don't know if you've seen those
I haven't seen them.
Yeah, I can show you them. Because they're this was.
But people share like Russian documents, or let's say RT is a Russian affiliated entity. People will share RT news broadcasts or little clips from it. That's what RT wants to show to the world. Now, if RT's telling them to do it, right? That's one thing. But if
right. No, I understand that there's going to be issues of like how far one's interpretation of fungibility and providing material support to a terrorist organization goes. Just to show you the official pamphlets I'm sending you in DMs that were that were distributed. So these are
by the kid.
This event. Yeah, these are they're not just like individually made pamphlets. Like, these are actually the Hamas official media office pamphlets.
Yeah, I mean, it's despicable. It's despicable to, but
No, the point. I know you think. No, we both are going to agree there. But the question is, like, once it gets to the line of like, okay, well, this is not just you are distributing. Or the event you're leading is distributing, which you presumably, or you could make the case, or presumably they're going to try to make the case that he was connected to this as the leader. It's not just that he's independently advocating, but now that they have like official Hamas pamphlets that they're distributing, they're going to. So okay, well, we'll go through several scenarios.
Yeah.
So scenario one is that there's an element of coordination between Hamas. Right. In some way, either through Qatar or through some other mediary to this group, and that's how they're distributing the official Hamas pamphlets. And I think in most cases, there's going to be agreement that that's going to fall
under material support.
under holder material support. Yes.
Yeah, I think
So
I would grant that. If they're in coordination with Hamas, I think America's well within its rights to make that a basis of deportability. And I don't think I'd have a problem with that on a First Amendment issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We did that with
just
kind of the Communist Party. But by the way, there was laws like that. They're disfavored, but still on the books in some of these adjustment of status papers or affirmative applications that you might give to immigration. You have to say whether or not you've been part of the Nazi Party or the Communist Party. That those are actually questions that they'll still ask you. And I've had clients before be like, "Why are you asking this?"
They ask you that, right?
What's that?
Did they ask you that when you apply for a visa? I think they ask you all sorts of questions.
Yeah, they ask you like, are you affiliated with the Nazi Party that existed and controlled the German government? And they'll ask you whether or not you're affiliated with the Communist Party of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So and just because coordination doesn't have to mean like you're an agent, like you're an actual Hamas member. So like it could be like Hamas like contracted someone in Qatar.
I would agree with that.
These.
I think that it wouldn't require an agency relationship.
Right. So if that was going through an intermediary channel to these protesters or organizations,
it would have to be knowing though. So whoever's being
yes. Yeah, they would have to know that eventually. Like, okay, well, I know this guy's not a Hamas, but I kind of know he's affiliated with. Yeah. I know who they're friends with. Sure. Okay. That I don't think is much. I think where and I don't think there's going to be much disagreement on if it's all the way on the other way. So for example, if this is just something that was done out of independent advocacy, that without the knowledge of this providing material fungible support to the terrorist organization, then it wouldn't fall under holder, because you have to, even if without coordination, the interesting part we can get to about without coordination, but with intent and with knowledge of fungible support, of material support to the organization, in virtue of the fungibility of currency.
Right, yeah. Although that connection to the terrorist activities isn't even as important under holder. So as long as you know that it's a terrorist organization, I think. And I think that most people there, if you would understand, right? At least terrorism as the word is used.
It's a terrorist organization, and you know that your actions are providing a material support to the terrorist organization, and you are intending to do that anyway.
Yes, I agree that those. I see there are three different predicates. So one is the knowledge that it's a organization that's been labeled terrorist by the government, and the intent
it's a designated terrorist organization. You have to know that
the intent with respect or knowledge with respect to the material support, and then the coordination. So I see those as kind of three distinct elements that are necessary.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yes. So I agree that if the last two, if the last two are absent, I don't think there's going to be much disagreement that it would not fall under holder. So if you have the knowledge of a designated terrorist organization, but you don't have the other two, you don't have coordination, you don't have the intent to do those things, then it wouldn't fall under holder. I think the interesting debate where I can see this going to a Supreme Court case is if you have the first two, but not the last. So if you have the knowledge that it's a designated terrorist organization, and you have the intent, you don't have the coordination,
right.
But you do have the intent to provide material support to the terrorist organization, and you are providing material support to the organization, and you're providing material support to the terrorist organization, then that's an interesting case to go to the Supreme Court and say, okay, well, does this fall under holder? And would this be something if you were actually?
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So, for example, if you are saying, okay, Hamas has to invest, and this is just my mere advocacy. I know that Hamas distributing these their official pamphlets cost them money. I want to alleviate. I'm going to alleviate whatever they can, and so they could use their money for other terrorist activities instead of doing this. So I'm going to do that for them. I'm going to help them out. So I'm going to be their distributor. I'm not going to do that with their explicit coordination. I'm not going to, I'm just going to do them a favor. I'm going to, I can, just like you can donate money, like you could, I don't have to coordinate. I could just send you an anonymous tip or whatever.
Yeah, I would
I
think that my hope is that you would not be okay with that. Whether it's interesting or not, I think that we haven't squarely faced that, and I don't think Holder says like we're not reaching this kind of speech, independent advocacy. So what we're talking about is whether or not it would cover truly independent advocacy of covered institutions for covered purposes, right? The material support. So
wait.
yeah.
When we say independent what I'm doing is I'm trying to
Isolate the coordination.
distinguish two forms of, like, I don't know how we're defining independent advocacy here, but I'm
Oh.
trying to distinguish different forms of that, which some may or may not.
When
fall
I'm
under
saying
Holder.
independent advocacy, what I mean is that there's no coordination. So I would.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Yep.
So
I'm using that
what I'm doing,
synonymously.
yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Then I'm
Yep.
trying to disarticulate different forms of independent advocacy, and the question would be whether there is a subset of independent advocacy that would still fall under Holder.
Right.
There maybe the most egregious forms of independent advocacy may fall under Holder, for example.
And they cannot be themselves other categories of unlawful speech. So, for example, incitement is its own category of unlawful speech.
Right.
You know,
right.
so
yeah, it's nonviolent. Nonviolent. Yeah, it's going to be a nonviolent. It's not going to be in another category. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's going to be like one of those egregious examples, like you're really doing something that is benefiting. So, I mean, just as a hypothetical, let's just say that you're not in coordination with a terrorist organization, but your advocacy is not just mere like your intellectual ideas, but you are really providing them with a financial break, sort of say. Like, let's say I was really just running the terrorist organization's pamphlet distribution service, for example, and I was doing it without their coordination. I'm just doing this for them. Like, I'm just printing out a whole bunch of Hamas official pamphlets. And some of them may even have, like, recruitment.
I basically think that that's how 95% of the online right operates with respect to Russia. That's basically what I think they're doing. So I totally get the consternation.
Just elaborate on that so everyone knows, like, why.
Yeah. So
I'm not saying I disagree. I'm not saying it, but
right.
I want to know what.
So even the Mueller report back in the day did not establish that there was a conspiracy between Trump and Russia. They didn't have facts to establish a conspiracy. But everyone who watches Trump or his surrogates kind of knows that they're taking the line from Moscow, or they at least hear the same exact thing. And it would be indistinguishable to what a true Russian agent might do with respect to media operations and like they're basically doing a lot of Putin's job with respect to spreading these false narratives, and I'm sure alleviating a lot of otherwise costly intelligence operations in America in a way that's invaluable to the Russian state. So that's what
just as a real quick point. So I see what you're saying in terms of the quality, but I think we both agree Russia's not a designated foreign terrorist organization.
Correct. Right. But let's be careful here. So I agree that they would not be covered by that specific law, but the First Amendment principle would at least be as elastic to cover foreign nations, which with which the country is in an adversary relationship. So I can imagine, for example, Congress passing a similar law that says we make these explicit findings with respect to the state of Russia or the state of China, and we find, or the state of Iran.
So
right?
If Holder applies to foreign countries that the United States is, if all the findings under Holder apply to that, then yes.
Right. So I think the First Amendment principle that we establish here, whether or not there's a direct statute on point that would literally prescribe, when I say prescribe, I mean criminalize the conduct in a similar way as the designated foreign terrorist statute, I want my First Amendment principle to stand up to the foreign country case, because I think it's actually probably even a stronger case to make from a, if you think about the founding, they weren't really concerned under the First Amendment. If you're taking an originalist perspective, they were concerned with foreign countries. They were concerned with, Great Britain. They were concerned with France. They were concerned with all these European powers. And so any principle as applied to foreign terrorist organizations with respect to the First Amendment is going to hold just as strong with adversary countries that Congress and the president, let's say, make findings. And they say, it's our finding that the state of Iran is a foreign, and they actually, Iran is designated as a foreign, as a supporter of foreign terrorism.
Sure. So going to the Republicans then, or So elaborate on the thing with the Mueller report.
Yeah, so it stopped short of finding a direct coordinated effort in the sense of the Trump campaign actually talking to Russia in the sense of, hey, why don't you start releasing these emails that are about Hillary and about how the DNC over Bernie and this and that at the same time that we do this, or that they had this kind of like direct meeting of the minds with specific Russian agents. The Mueller report did not find that. Notwithstanding the fact that they did not find that explicit coordination, I find it highly problematic that Trump is parroting the Putin talking points and that he's parroting sympathetic as though he were in charge of RT, as though he were an operative of the Putin talking point seminar, whatever that is. And even assume for a second that Trump was actually literally reading RT and just directly reading verbatim the RT talking points that Russia puts out from the prompter. Even in that,
let's say Trump was giving out pamphlets like the Hamas pamphlet. Like, let's say Trump was like and he wasn't coordinating. They didn't find coordination, but he was distributing Putin pamphlets, and some of them may have even had like recruitment. Like offers. Be like, oh, you want to join the Russian army and fight Ukraine? Like, here's where you sign up.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think if you're literally inciting, and I don't actually think this is true under Holder, that membership in those organizations was criminal. I don't know that I actually think it wasn't. So I don't know that it's tested that your mere membership in a foreign terrorist organization is illegal or criminal. I'm not sure that that's the case, but supposing it were, I could imagine it actually being a problem for you to like incite people to do it.
Right. Then that's interesting because then it falls under incitement.
Right.
So let's just say that it would. Yeah. So let's say it wouldn't be, the mere membership wouldn't be incitement, because you can be a member without actually. You can be a nonviolent member. It's possible.
Yep.
Okay. So let's say that Trump were doing that sort of thing. He was saying, okay, well, here's where you could sign up. Here's these pamphlets. So number one, I'm distributing them on behalf of Russia. So whatever cost that they would have had to do, I'm actually doing this on my dime, or my company's dime, the U.S.'s dime.
We just love what Russia's doing.
Yeah.
So
they're doing it on. Wait, what? Go ahead.
I think that you're fucked. Like not you personally, but in terms of anyone who wants to criminalize or prescribe that conduct, they're just out of luck.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing. Yeah. And then the question is, is that sort of thing that gets to it is independent advocacy in the sense there's no coordination, but it is like it is so egregious. And I guess just to make it completely analogous, like if Trump, because just in case someone does, I hear your point about translation between designated foreign terrorist organizations versus foreign countries you're at odds with, just to get around the whole debate about like, well, Trump's like, oh, we're not at odds with Russia anymore. We love Russia. In fact, we're Russians poodle. Like we're Russians little poodle now. So how could we be at odds? So let's just say hypothetically Trump was doing this for Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
like Trump was printing out Al Qaeda pamphlets in support and just distributing those around and saying, okay, well, I'm taking a little bit of debt off Al Qaeda now.
Yeah.
So
I think same result for me.
Yeah. And what would your result be?
The result would be that it's not directly, except to the extent, and I don't actually know this, that membership itself, and let's not just deal with that. Let's put that aside because I don't know the answer there. But to the extent that it's just alleviating with the intent to alleviate a specific need of Al Qaeda and to promote the aims of Al Qaeda, I think that the answer to that is a political answer, and it's political solutions. Maybe you
but you wouldn't see that as being a grounds. Yeah, you wouldn't see that as being falling under Holder.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, I gotcha.
So that's the preserve that line, because that line to me
and
really
you want to
matters.
preserve it. You don't want it to fall under Holder. Also.
Correct.
Yeah. I see.
What's your take?
So, I'm not sure I would have a problem with that falling under Holder in both cases, in the Trump case or the Hamas case.
And the distinguisher there is your intuition about how bad the foreign entity is?
No. It's not a distinguisher. I take the same position on both cases. I wouldn't have a problem if someone's printing out Putin shit. If someone in our government is printing out pro-Putin or pro-Mullah pamphlets or Al-Qaeda pamphlets or Hamas pamphlets.
You're going to let them.
And they're really doing it with the intent to alleviate their costs. I wouldn't have a problem if there was a Supreme Court case and they just decided, you know what, actually our interpretation is if we have the first two, knowledge of a designated terrorist organization and knowledge that you are alleviating their financial debt or whatever, or helping them financially, and intent to do so. That's why you're doing it. But there's no coordination. I don't think I'd have a problem with a Supreme Court ruling that ended up like interpreting it as falling under Holder in all of those cases that we were talking about.
Got it.
So long as your argument goes through about the Russia case being that principle that so long as it applies to foreign terrorist organizations, it will also apply to foreign nations that are enemies of the United States.
Which
yes, because I can see that being challenged as well. Yeah.
Got it. You're not committed to that, to that distinction, or to that principle that I just laid out for you.
I'm not. I don't know enough to be committed to that principle. I could. That's just my ignorance. Maybe I'm just missing something.
Mm-hmm.
But would it surprise me if a lawyer decided to challenge that principle and try to make that? And I go through no, and I don't know how that's going to play out.
So
to be honest with you, I wouldn't know if someone tried to like make this case play out in the Supreme Court. Like, what are your thoughts if someone were to try to make the case that not coordination, but if you do have the knowledge of foreign terrorist organization and you do have like some sort of egregious type of support and knowledge of the support, and it is your intent to do so, then that would be enough to fall under Holder. Where would you see the Supreme Court
as a predictive matter?
As a predictive matter.
I have no clue. No, they might make some kind of discrete category for what we're talking about here. They might.
You wouldn't be surprised either way, right?
Yeah, I'm not, because I don't respect the Supreme Court really that much. But
right. I understand.
Immigration is a category of its own sometimes, where people will view immigration as, the immigration is just different. And so I could see a holding that's very much like avoiding the issue and saying, well, you always accept immigration on the conditions that the government gives you, and those conditions can be much lower than the regular conditions. So we're not holding the right. You can kind of get a sense of how they could skirt the issue. So in terms of this court, not sure as a predictive matter, but I do want to challenge a little bit. I don't know if it'll have an effect on your intuition that you'd be okay with that. It seems like that second intent prong here I'm referencing, with the purpose to aid in a kind of fungible way the specific benefit, your material benefit, that kind of is a toothless prong, that anyone is going to say, well, you knew it was Al-Qaeda, right? Yeah. And you knew that giving pamphlets is generally helpful to Al-Qaeda. Yeah. And you know that people charge for pamphlets. Yeah. And actually you had a lot of people near you, right, that were listening to what you were saying. Yeah. And you guys know that you were the biggest protest in the country, right? Yeah. And so you knew it was material, right? Yeah. Like, it just feels like
one more element. More element is that you wanted, like, your purpose of doing it is you really wanted to do it beyond mere advocacy. You wanted to take the debt off them.
You wanted you'd have to prove. Well, then that's a harder test to maintain.
Yeah, it's a harder thing. Yeah. No, it is a harder. Yes, I agree. Yes, it is a harder thing to prove. But if that one more element is there, like, it's not just that by happenstance your primary goal was mere advocacy, but I think that's going to be hard to prove in this case too. But so just talking about my preferences about what I'm okay with doing, if the goal here is not just that by happenstance it supported the terrorist organization with the goal of mere independent advocacy, but the goal is mere independent advocacy plus a more specific goal of actually alleviating the debt or helping financially this organization.
And the government would have a burden to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. In that case, I wouldn't have I don't think I would have a problem, because then it's beyond just someone advocating that just by happenstance it is benefiting the terrorist organization financially, they are using their advocacy to financially benefit them with that intent. Like that's the purpose.
And I'm
I see
guessing
those two things as different.
it sounds kind of like a standard that you're implying here, which is that the evidence that shows the advocacy itself can't be, you need to have kind of an independent basis of evidence to show.
Right. Yeah. For example, like I'll give you two different hypothetical scenarios,
Sure.
and it's I think so. So let's say in one case, I printed out a few pamphlets for distribution on campus, and that just happened to be in with a bunch of other pamphlets that I had, and I also advocated and stuff like that. Like that, it's going to be very hard to show that I'm just trying to alleviate their debt or something like that. However, if what I've done is I've set up a whole bunch of printing machines, and I've made like these done everything I can to get the official line of the terrorist organization, the official pamphlets, the official propaganda. I've just mass printed them and hired a bunch of people to deliver them and distribute them among all the colleges and everything like that. It seems like that there, and it just so happened to be that there was an initiative with the terrorist organization to do this, and they would have had to pay a lot of money to do this. However, I didn't coordinate with them. But
I don't like this at all, because I mean, think about this, right? So I think I see where you're going, right? Where you're implying from the conduct, this is a kind of broader operation that would be materially expensive for that terrorist organization. But then it kind of gets
not just that,
okay.
but that's not it. What I'm trying to imply here, the reason I'm saying this is something that the reason I'm adding this is something they would have just so happened to do. They would have been trying. The knowledge was there that the terrorist organization was going to try to pay for this specific thing, and you're covering in for that specific thing to do it. That's not the point here. Is to show that this is reason to believe that's not mere motive of advocacy, but rather a additional motive to unburden their costs. So, because you can advocate in a lot of different ways, but if you just happen to know that they're going to pay a lot of money for XYZ specific advocacy, and you just happen to run in and sweep in and cover XYZ specific advocacy without directly coordinating with them or whatnot, then that would be evidence that your motive is more than just I want to advocate for them. It's you want to advocate for them in the ways that are going to materially benefit them.
Okay,
you want to materially benefit them.
I present to you the following example of a large streamer. Someone who, we're in a digital world. We live in a context where a lot of this media, if not most of it, that people receive is online. And, people might pay a lot of money for someone with a large platform presence where it's not calculated in terms of the amount of printing presses you have or the people that you're literally sending your pamphlets around to. But you have 2 million Twitter followers. And you have a group of dedicated mods that might retweet your messages. And you say, hey, I really believe in this message, and I'm going to tweet it out to my 2 million followers. It's as though back in the olden days, you just had 1,000 printing presses, and you're sending it to more people. Now it's easier because you have an online platform. It would seem that same principle would extend to the person with a larger platform, that if they were to use their platform in the ultra valuable way, to spread to as many people as possible. Hell, they even make a video about it, that they would have less First Amendment rights to do the same constitutive act that someone with less.
This is why I specified additional conditions. It wasn't just that you made a printing. Yeah. There were additional conditions. So, for example, I added in the condition that in that example, or at least I added in the particulars in that example, that you happen to have gained knowledge that there was going to be this initiative by this terrorist organization to spend a lot of money on this specific sort of thing. And so then that they're going to invest a lot of money and drop a lot of money on this, and then you decide to cover that specific thing. Where if you just did this other thing anyway, they wouldn't have lost that money. So so it would be more analogous to a streamer finding out that there's a very specific message that, let's say, a terrorist organization was going to pay a sponsorship fee to promote a very specific type of message on a very specific day. They were going to go and they were going to promote it. They were going to pay ads or whatever, or however the algorithm works, that they pay X amount of money for X amount of engagement or whatever. And they're going to spend a lot of money. You find out that you got knowledge of that. You find out they're going to do that. And you said, you know what? I'm not going to coordinate with them, but I'm going to preemptively do that same message, and because I have so much of a following, it's going to be not even worth it for them to promote it because it's already done. And so then you do that.
I see. It feels like what you're doing there, and you tell me if you disagree, is you're kind of, in my opinion, you're pushing the coordination. And what you're doing is you're kind of having a kind of constructive coordination there. And that's what's changing, is the element of...
So if you want to define that, if you want to subsume that under coordination, that's fine. But that's going to be a broader interpretation of coordination. There was no communication. Yeah, because there was no communication between this example between that individual and terrorist party. And there was no
wink, wink, nod, nod. Kind of like what Trump does. He wink, wins. He actually says, Russia, if you're listening, go find your emails, right?
Yes. See, but even that is more coordination. Like, this is no even wink, wink, nod, nod. This is just you getting open source information. You've got open source information and you've reacted to it in a way that covers their costs. This isn't even communicating directly or indirectly. You're not communicating with an intermediary. You're not even going to a television and going wink, wink.
But let's say they at this point, it's kind of semantic which one it is subsumed under. Implied.
The point is, you'd have to broaden one. You'd have to broaden one or accept the other. Exactly. So you either have to broaden the coordination aspect, in which case, if we're broadening the coordination aspect, it's going to raise some questions. In this case, okay, well, how much coordination does this individual have, and what degree of coordination with Hamas or any of their intermediaries, or any of the winking that this individual might be doing? So it might make it easier for Rubio to get his case here,
right?
At least in this case, if we broaden coordination or our interpretation.
I'm concerned about that because I know that I live in a context in America where we're not just worried about the end trial that's going to happen, but the investigatory steps that lead up to it. So I'm concerned that if there is a loosening on either of those restrictions, then there'll be more desire to get probable cause and see, hey, what were you reading up to when you released that statement? We know that you released a statement. We know that Russia supports it. We know that it's the same statement that Russia gives, or we know that it's the same one that Al-Qaeda gives. All we're missing now is, did he read something that Al-Qaeda was looking for someone somewhere? And I'm concerned that invites, intrusive police activity, investigatory activity that can chill, and it'll chill people, and I think there are costs associated with people worrying about what they're reading, people worrying about what they're saying, because a creative prosecutor might, even though they've never talked to anybody, but on the basis of their interpretation of what the needs are, or the stated needs, or even implied needs, let's say, of a foreign designated terrorist organization or a foreign country, let's say if there's a equivalent statute, that they'll go digging and looking, and that they'll have to go through the burden of a trial just to find out whether or not it's covered. I mean, I think that there's a utility to having this bright line be communication.
Yes, there may be, and there's going to have to be some ways of increasing or making the standard of what is probable cause on these components, or maybe the key component here, to be high enough to alleviate those concerns. So it's going to have to be. It can't just be like some kind of flimsy thing. It's going to have to be some clear, repeated pattern of some sort of not just mere material advocacy or mere advocacy or happenstance material support, but a consistent pattern of activity that is much more consistent with an additional motive to provide material support.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or alleviate debt or something like that, per se, in addition to mere advocacy.
Okay. I know you're not going to fall for this one because you are going to be consistent because you're a good guy. But I'm just going to do it anyway, just for fun. A lot of people say that Israel's a terrorist state. A lot of people say that Israel has a genocidal intent. A lot of people say that Israel is an organization that fundamentally doesn't deserve to exist. That they say that Israel's mere,
I'll skip to the end. Like if Israel was legally designated as a foreign terrorist organization, then everything I would say would apply to that as well.
Is that the world you want to live in? I feel like that's a world where the government can change on the dime.
Well, it's not a world I want to live in the sense that. So here's the thing: it's not a world I want to live in, but not because I don't want the law to apply like that. It's the world I want to live in because I don't want like states that are not what I see as not terrorists to be labeled as terrorists. Yeah, but I understand there's always a risk of that. I understand there's any world will have that risk. I don't see that risk.
I think the risk is a who decides question.
Sure.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and that's look. This is why we need to have reliable institutions, and
And
why
I
we have
think
to.
that if it was
Yeah.
President Ilhan Omar, in no
Mhm.
world would you want this kind of standard applied to Israel. And I think it's because your intuition of that conflict is very different than Ilhan Omar's intuition of
Well,
that conflict.
I wouldn't want it to. I wouldn't want it. So, just to be clear, I wouldn't want it to be applied to Israel in the sense that Israel is designated as a terrorist
But you want the
organization.
government
But
to
if
have that
Israel
power.
is but if Israel really was designated as a terrorist organization, then I would support the thing. Then I agree that all the things should
Okay.
follow from it. It's not that I don't think those things shouldn't follow from it. They should follow from it. My problem wouldn't be with that part. It would
It would
just
be
be
the
the part of
designation.
yes. I would just disagree with the designation part. If
Got it.
in the situation where
See, I told you
Elon
guys
Musk said,
he wasn't gonna be inconsistent, obviously. But no, listen. I'm like a First Amendment cuck. Maybe that's my problem. I saw everyone being hot.
I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. By the way,
Yeah,
I may not be a cuck like that, but look, I can understand where you're coming from.
yeah, and I'm concerned, especially with this administration. Everything seems to be in line with chilling certain speech.
Yeah.
Whether
Well,
that's
let me ask you a question.
yeah.
This is interesting. Like, let's say this whole thing was happening, and all the arguments that I were making were
Mhm.
under like a much more sane administration. So let's say that instead of the Trump administration, like who's a sane Republican? Like, what if it was the Romney administration or
Yeah.
something? Or pick whatever Republican administration you think is like you may disagree with, but you think is like not insane.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
Romney,
if it was
right?
that, yeah, I don't know. You tell me. Like,
I think I would 100% still be against it. Number one, for like, we saw that result in the George Bush era. A lot of these cases, Holders, obviously that's under Obama, but that litigation happened for a while. And a lot of those cases in terms of fundamental rights in the context of the war on terror, that occurred under Bush. And I don't love a lot of that precedent or a lot of what we got out of it. Not even necessarily just the Patriot Act.
Your position wouldn't change, but presumably
Yeah.
you wouldn't be as worried about it. The magnitude.
Yes, no, of course, yeah. Under this administration, I'm more worried about this under this administration because I don't believe that they're acting in good faith, right, to enforce those laws in the way that you're describing, where it would be a thoughtful, perhaps judicious prosecutor who is really taking a sense of the facts to see if we could reasonably or at least plausibly imply some connection based on the actions and the specific desire to materially support or to alleviate some kind of need that is present in those organizations. If I thought that the administration were engaged in a kind of good faith approach to those elements, I'd be less concerned. I'd still be against it, but I'd be less concerned. But in this context, I mean, it's crazy. Like, this administration has shown that it's willing to do everything to service and to scare and cajole its own interest. Sorry, to service its own interest, to cajole other people, to scare people. Right? They're going after law firms. You might not agree with what Columbia did, but rescinding all that money just on the basis of that belief. I mean, colleges are supposed to be challenging. Universities are supposed to be challenging. Now, what occurred with some of the protests, absolutely out of control. I don't fucking agree with Hamas. I'm the first to say that. But it's fucking crazy in my mind that we would give any benefit of the doubt to this administration in terms of free speech. I mean, he's in court right now suing Ann Selzer over a poll that he disagreed with. He's fighting with all these news organizations. It's absurd, and it's one more attack, and this is one that affects people in a more provocative way. It's affecting their very freedom. These are green card holders, and there's no process.
You definitely don't have to convince me that the administration's insane. No, I'm with you there. Just to be clear, but at least what they're going to argue for, I don't think they're going to argue in the Columbia case that they're rescinding the contracts because of the mere espoused views. I think they.
But what do you believe is actually at play?
No, what I'm saying, I think that. Sorry.
Sorry. When you said that I don't think they're going to advocate. I don't think that they're going to say that they're rescinding the $400 million because of the expression of view. But wouldn't you accept that under at least very much seems like what's at stake here is the fact that Columbia seemed to tolerate more of the protests than other schools.
Yeah, so I think they're going to, no, just to be clear, I think they're targeting, I don't think it's a question about why they're targeting Columbia with say like lawfare or whatever, but I think the lawfare that they're going to play is not going to be the like obviously defeated position of, well, you said something we don't like. They're going to try to say
they're going to
that
have
you
some
violated
made for litigation type. They do this all the time, right? They'll have, even with the who leads Doge, right? They have a public position, which is it's Elon Musk, and then they have a litigation position, which is it's this random woman no one's ever fucking heard of who's in Mexico right now. And they do that with everything. Yeah, they have a litigation position where they try to find some category, some exception, but everyone kind of knows what's going on here. What's going on here is they want to be enemies to a certain class of people, and they don't like these individuals based on what they say. Now, the proof is in the pudding, right? What did he do with all the violent insurrectionists that tried to steal the 2020 election? He let them free. This guy doesn't give a shit about property damage. Yeah. So it's all bullshit.
Yeah. No. Just to be clear, I'm not trying to make the case that, the Trump administration is just caring about this principle that they have and they're applying it consistently. No, of course not.
Yeah.
What's very clear is they have a certain type of objective. There's certain things they like and they don't like, and the question is, can they find a legal basis to get that done, rather than are they just applying their principles?
And in the case of the First Amendment, that to me is the worst thing you can do, because the First Amendment requires there to be more room than other rights. It's not like the kind of a specific right, let's say, to property, or a right to a jury trial, right? Those with free speech is a little different, because people are affected by this incentive structure right away. And you saw it with the AP stuff, right? They kick out the AP reporters because they want to send a signal to other people. Hey, if you don't listen to Gulf of America, we're going to cut your access off. Now, I don't even know that it's outside of his legal authority to do that, right? To like say you're not part of the press pool. Like, that's something where there's a lot of deference probably to the president in terms of his determination of who gets to be in the press pool and who doesn't get to be in the press pool. I'm sure that's true. But it shows you the kind of reason why he does this. He knows now that the reporters got the message that if they want to stay in the press pool, if they want to maintain their access, they have to ask him comfortable questions, and they have to proceed with his lingo. Right. And that's what's going to happen with the use of actual government force in the most provocative way with respect to the First Amendment, where we should be the most guard for ambiguity, for lack of clarity. I mean, there's a reason there's a specific overbreadth and vagueness doctrine that's literally specific to the First Amendment, because of all
I'm with you on all of that. I'm with you on the issues of ambiguity and vagueness for sure. There shouldn't have been a tweet just saying that, okay, we will be revoking visas or green cards of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported, without anything else dialed in. If you want to have a position that says, okay, if it meets material support criteria, and here's our criteria for that, and if you don't think that meets the Supreme Court standard, we'll go to court over it, or dial all of that in. Be as specific as you can about what you will and what you won't go after.
Yeah.
I agree with all of them.
Well, can I ask you a question, just to emphasize it, not necessarily for you, but for the audience? Under some definitions of the term Hamas supporter, would you consider Cenk Uygur to be a Hamas supporter?
Under some
reasonable versions of the term Hamas supporter, would you consider Cenk Uygur to be a Hamas supporter?
When you say reasonable,
reasonable to you?
Do you mean reasonable to me? No.
Yeah. No. Oh, okay.
No. I think he's when you say no, I don't think so. I don't think he's Hassan. Maybe actually, Hassan, I'm more agnostic about. I don't know with that guy. Holy shit! I don't know, because I don't watch Hassan as much. But from what I have watched, would it surprise me? No. What I've watched from Cenk, he will engage in terrorist apologia. He will be very critical of Israel. But have I seen him support Hamas? Have I seen him have I seen him also support Hamas to the degree that I would consider him a Hamas supporter? I don't think so. I have seen him denounce
him a Hamas supporter. I'll just say that.
I'm sure they do.
But I just want to have that out there, because it's interesting to me that there are a lot of people calling Hassan a Hamas supporter, and Avi.
Oh, if you asked me that question, wait, that's not the question.
No, I know that's not the question. I know that's not the question.
I would say yes.
No, I know that you would agree that a lot of people call him a Hamas supporter, but you wouldn't call him a Hamas supporter based on what you've seen.
Correct.
So I just think that's interesting to put out there that like a lot of people call him a Hamas supporter, and Avi, who I think your ear is pretty tuned for dog whistling or I don't know. You would probably say that you do hear dog whistling from Hassan, or do you even have an opinion?
No,
on that?
I do. No.
Okay.
I no. That's why I said with Hassan, I'm more agnostic. Like I would pick. I do get dog whistling, but I don't get I actually don't really get dog whistling vibes from Cenk as much as I get just general like Israel hate and by extension some more broad terrorist apologia. In the sense of just anything that is against terrorists that can have any plausible way of any collateral is just like the most evil thing ever. But I don't get dog whistling in terms of like, oh yeah, Hamas are really like the good guys are resisting,
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think that this is.
But I do get that vibes from Hassan.
No, I understand, which is why I'm saying this is exactly what I'm worried about. I think you're.
But just to be clear, I'm saying vibes. I'm not. I'm saying vibes from Hassan. I'm not saying like, oh, he's a
I respect that, but here's why I'm concerned, because I consider you a reasonable person. I think you probably support Israel more than I do. That said, I don't think that you're going to be running these policies. I don't think that Avi is going to be running this stuff. And if there's so much, and I guess you already agree at this point, this is just for the audience. If there's so much difference of opinion on who's a Hamas supporter, even among like our major streamers, where the biggest political streamer is considered by a lot of people, including I think Ethan Klein at this point, to be a de facto Hamas supporter. I'm concerned about who decides and who makes these rules, and I don't trust the people in power.
That's why I said that with that Marco Rubio tweet that it should have been very specifically dialed in, that it shouldn't have just been. I also don't think it should just be a Hamas supporter under reasonable interpretations of Hamas supporter. It should be specifically
objective. Yeah.
Yes. Under here are the criteria that we consider a Hamas supporter, and it's not just some like, oh, reasonable LOL. It's, if you are like what we just discussed, it is a foreign terrorist organization, and you are aware of it. You are providing material aid, and you are aware of it, and it is your goal, and it is this and that, like something like that, where it's all outlined clearly, and then material condition is all defined as such, and like how much, and there's this minimum threshold.
God,
blah, blah, blah.
I hate this. I'm just gonna be honest. I think you're reasonable, and I understand the points that you made, and I think they're even more nuanced than I thought reading your tweets. But if I had to suffer through all the tankies, you have to suffer through the Palestinian kids in college. I mean, that's just what I don't know what to say. It's so annoying for me every day to see all these people talking about how Stalin's great, how Ukraine are Nazis, or who are saying all these lies that I know originate from Russia.
Clear, I don't like the tankies either. I know. I would have the same. I would have the same view on for them.
Okay, that's fair. I guess that's fair. Where else do we? So I guess we'll wait and see.
By the way, I'll cut to level this. I would have the same view on supporters of Kahanists or other, which is actually funny because it's a designated terrorist organization in Israel. It's a pro-Israel terrorist organization designated by terrorists in Israel, but I don't think actually the United States has designated them as a terrorist organization. Which is kind of funny. But if they were, it's what? What?
What about Haaretz?
Haaretz?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know how to pronounce it.
Well, that's a news. That is a left-wing newspaper in Israel. That's essentially just like the RT equivalent of an anti-Israel within Israel, anti-Israel type of propaganda.
Right. So if you have a Haaretz reporter in the United States, you got enough there.
But I don't think that they. So the question is, would they be providing material? No, I think what they're doing is actually just advocacy. It would be mere advocacy. I don't think Haaretz has intent.
Okay, I'm going to give you a hard hypo. Here's a hard hypo. Maybe you'll be able to handle it. I think it's hard. New York Times publishes op-eds from Hamas.
Yeah.
They know it. They're coordinated. They edit it. And they publish it.
Well, now it's more. Well, now there's coordination. It makes it less interesting because now I think if they are in coordination with Hamas, and if they are publishing their stuff, and especially if they're paying them to write for them, I actually think that just very clearly falls under the criteria here, and that's actually not as much of an interesting hypothetical. I think that just straightforwardly falls under Holder, because now you have the element of coordination too.
I think that you're right that you have coordination there, but there the idea is this is journalistic. Do you have a carve out for true journalism? I mean, but it's kind of an op-ed.
Okay,
I mean, we're publishing the View. Maybe we need to think more about the carve outs.
So the question is, would I okay, so you're asking. So I just want to get a little clearer. You're asking me. Are you asking me? Do I think it falls under Holder? Because I do think that would also fall under Holder.
The question is more specifically: shouldn't there be?
Do I want it to fall under Holder?
I guess both. Would you want it to fall under Holder? Okay, sure. Like basically, do you think this should be criminal, or that at the very least the First Amendment should not protect it? And
so in terms of my wants, in terms of my wants, what I would want is I would want that sort of thing to be allowed in the context of the principle that is, if it's not within the principles of Holder, that why they made that in the first place. So let me explain. What I want is for, if you are bringing Hamas on in terms of an interview to challenge them, for example, or to get information out of them or whatnot, for the New York Times, and they're writing it, then I wouldn't want there to be an issue with that. However, if the New York Times had a journalist that was sympathetic to Hamas's plight and just wanted to support them, to use their platform to provide support for them, to provide assistance in some way, to help legitimate.
Now they know it's going to help them, but they're just
but they want to help them. That's right. So the journalists, they're doing it because they want people to get the perspective of Hamas.
So I guess I would distinguish there purposeful from knowing. So one is purposely trying to help what they're doing versus knowing that whatever their ultimate purpose is, it will help them. And you're looking at the purpose.
So what I'm being specific is the purpose. It's not just that they know that they'll help them. In the situation where they're doing it for the purpose of helping them. So, for example, we want to get Hamas's word out there. They just have a journalist that's sympathetic to Hamas. They want to get their word out there. I think that, yes, that should fall under Holder, and I think it just does straightforward.
So you would just apply Holder thoughtfully.
Yes. Then that just very, very cleanly and straightforwardly just falls under Holder. Okay. I don't think there's going to be much dispute about that.
But I think, I'm concerned about these lines because I think that there ought to be more bright lines than not bright lines. I agree that ultimately you have to ground out into some purpose, some motive, which reasonable minds can disagree about. But to the most extent that if we could make things more clear in the context of First Amendment principles, I think that's super, super important. There's a question here from Blonde Philosophy. Knowing the justifications are the same as supporting. I think that Avi is saying something else. He's saying that mere knowledge is not enough, that you need to have the purpose to actually help them, not just merely the knowledge that that the interview, let's say you're interviewing.
There's a difference between knowledge that you are helping someone versus knowledge that you are helping someone and the purpose of helping them. This is the reason why I'm doing it, is because I want to help them.
Right. And Joanna's follow-up, I think, is where I'm at, which is how do you distinguish from other organizations that hold that exact same justification? I think that it's based on, I think Avi would say based on the evidence is how you distinguish knowledge and purpose.
Right. That's just an empirical, that's an empirical question.
But I'm concerned about that because for the reasons stated.
It might be hard, but we gave some hypotheticals where, some set of observations might be more expected on one hypothesis than the other.
So we would distinguish RT from New York Times, but you wouldn't distinguish RT from Haaretz. Because
no, I think RT and Haaretz are they're basically just propaganda outlet
for Hamas and for Russia and Hamas respectively.
Yeah, well, Haaretz is a bit more nefarious. So what I think RT is good. A counterpart would be like Al Jazeera.
Okay.
Haaretz is actually an Israeli newspaper.
Yeah.
But the English version of Haaretz specifically, essentially, they've been co-opted by essentially neo-Nazis. They have a huge neo-Nazi following now, and even though that they're an Israeli paper, they have like a combination between like leftist anti-Israel following and like right-wing neo-Nazi following, and they're essentially some sort of audience captured by that. And over the course of the Israel-Hamas war, their takes that they have been publishing have been more and more just unhinged. And they've eventually just become the English version of them, which is funny because the Hebrew version of Haaretz is actually quite different. It's amazing. Sometimes the same story in Hebrew is just different in English for some reason.
So can I ask you, Al Jazeera, they've actually like been embedded sometimes with Hamas, right? Or they've done these like very close interviews with, what's his name? Who's the guy? Or they've observed, he was the leader of Hamas for a while. He planned.
Oh yeah, they have ties. They have ties.
Yeah.
I mean, the particulars are here and there, but I think it's very It's very accepted at this point that Haaretz, that Al Jazeera is, this Qatari funded organization, that they basically are a mouthpiece of Hamas.
You consider Al Jazeera a mouthpiece of Hamas?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Or at least in part, in terms of the relationship between Hamas versus Israel, yeah, they're a mouthpiece of Hamas. Yeah.
Oof. Well, this is a super interesting conversation. Maybe I think that there are some principled agreements at the edges where I think that you would say independent advocacy without any intent to materially support should not be covered. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that this kind of direct coordination with and I think we're both okay with the line being foreign as opposed to domestic, right? I think that that's true. Yep. I don't think that you would say the same thing for, let's say, a domestic terrorist organization. No,
because then a lawyer won't be able to defend them. Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's all cool.
And that's also in my understanding of Holder as well, that it only applied to foreign terrorist organizations, designated foreign terrorist organizations.
Yeah, I think they would be much less willing to do it. I guess where we disagree is the play on the joints with respect to...
yeah, it's exactly where I thought it would come down to. Yes, with the two and not the three. An egregious two without the three.
I'm concerned about who's enforcing what or determining what's egregious, and I think you're concerned. You just are done with these motherfuckers.
No, just to be clear, I'm not concerned about that. Yeah. Also, I'm also concerned about that. I'm also but on the other hand, I'm also concerned about the way we interface with terrorist threats. I'm also concerned about the type of laxity that we've treated it, and the type of humanitarian cucking a la peacenik fairy tales that we've treated terrorist threats with, that have rewarded and incentivized them. And my ultimate view on terrorist threats is that it's an existential threat. In the past, it was swords, and you would lucky if they could just use swords today. Now they have machine guns and bombs and the occasional plane. And the problem in the future, we may consider ourselves lucky if they just had that. They may have civilization-ending weapons. And I think that because as technology increases, the threat of terrorism is going to get greater and greater, that the way we interface with terrorist threats is fundamentally flawed. The way that we handle terrorist threats and the way that we have policies that allow them leeway and allow them to have rewards and incentives to commit further acts of terrorism for certain humanitarian concerns is profoundly dangerous and may culminate in a genuine existential threat to the long-term survival of civilization.
By America, are you talking about these policies, or Israel, or the world generally imposing?
The world, the entire world. Like, this is like Israel Palestine is just one small example of my concern about how we interface with terrorists. Like, I think our entire approach globally is like extremely dangerous.
I don't disagree that terrorism is a huge issue. I've always thought that the left and the Democrats undersell the danger of terrorism, and especially and specifically Islamic terrorism. I have never thought that's not, it's just like a mere, they're just some people in the desert. I think that it is a significant threat that needs to be met head on. I'm not equipped to have the discussion on how best to do that. I also see a question from Joanna that I want to ask you in a second, but first I want to say what I'm most concerned from a civilizational perspective is people like Trump and right-wing authoritarianism. I'm more concerned about our domestic situation in terms of the motherfuckers in power right now than I am about foreign terrorists. I'm just being honest with you about my intuition.
Right. No,
about the threat level.
I hear you. I figured this is, and that's why I asked the question, like, what if
Yeah.
it were like Romney or something? Because like,
Yeah.
I was trying to like I was trying to say like, okay, well, what if I were to have this conversation with Pisco if it wasn't just like this insane Republican administration?
Yeah.
What if like it was like some like, you know, he disagrees with them, but he doesn't think they're.
The thing is, I'm always scared of a Trump-like figure now, and so that's that's going to be kind of guiding. It's kind of like the 9/11 situation where after 9/11, whenever you get on a plane, you still kind of feel that fear, right? I don't know about you, but whenever I'm on a plane, I still think about 9/11. That event is one of my first memories that I have is watching 9/11, and it has forever changed how I just interact at airports all the time. I'm always thinking about it. And so I think we're in a post-Trump era where I'm always going to be thinking about our structures vis-a-vis someone like Trump getting into power. And so that's 100% like going to be guiding me.
See any hope of ever get to a post 9/11 phase or a post Trump phase where we don't have, or we have certain institutions in place where we can have certain reasonable amount of safety thresholds and guards to ensure someone sane enough will be in power.
I really hope, Avi. Yeah. I want to ask you this question from Joanna real quick, if that's okay. Or you can go.
Go for it.
Joanna asks, I don't know these terms, by the way. What about Mir Kanan, though? Because he was an American but started an ultranational.
Mir Kanan, this is what I spoke about. Yeah, I said I have the same view to Kahanists. Okay. So, for example, the one thing I mentioned is that it's a little ironic because Kahanists or Kach, they are not they're listed as a terrorist organization by Israel themselves. So just for those who don't know, they are an extremist pro-Israeli group.
Oh, right. Yep.
And their position is essentially to expel like not just all Palestinians but all Arabs from Israel, just broadly. And they have engaged in various acts of terrorism to try to make that happen. And so the point I was making is it's ironic that the United States hasn't actually labeled them a terrorist organization, but Israel has. But just to get around that point, just to hypothetically say, if the United States had labeled the Kahanists, the Kach movement or whatnot, as a foreign terrorist organization, would I have all the same views for them? And the answer is, of course I would.
What about the JDL?
Yes, no, that's another one. That's another similar one. I would say the same thing for the JDL as I would for Kach or whatever Kahanist related. They're another. By the way, they're also Kahanist inspired. The JDL.
Got it. So you put them in the same bucket.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool beans. What else we got? I mean, I have a very horrible feeling in my spine that you voted for Trump, and that makes me upset. I don't know if it's true, but that is what my intuition tells me, and it kind of makes me angry as well. But let
me ask you this question. let me ask you this question, Pisco.
Yeah.
So what's in a situation where you want the truth over like let's say your wife cheated on you, but you didn't know, and you could have like a really happy life, just moving on with your life with her. Would you want to know the truth, or would you want to just live?
Question. It's the Matrix question, right?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, what do you value more? Do you value the truth more, or do you value just like your sanity or your happiness? Like, what's more important to you?
I think I want the truth, but it makes me sad because I think it's going to be the answer I don't want. And because I don't think that you would vote third party, because I think that I don't know if you're one of those people who say it's irrational to vote in general, but I think you probably vote because you get some kind of your own, goodness out of it. And so you probably rationalize your voting that way. And
wait, how do we get off the wife cheating on you part? Wait,
if the wife cheating, all right, let me think. I think I'd want to. Oh, it depends, huh? I think
maybe it was someone you know that she cheated on you with. Oh my goodness!
Oof. But that implies I know the answer, right?
No, well, no. There's two worlds that you could be in. So you could be in the world where your wife cheated on you, and you find out, you find out who it was with, or you can choose to live in the world where you don't find out. So you're like transplanted into the universe where all of that happened, but you don't find out.
And there's no other effect, right?
And there's no other effect, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So all of that you live in so you could choose the universe to live in where you.
Okay. Here's the difference.
Yeah.
If it would change how I think about that person in terms of what she's likely to do next, right? Think about that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I do actually get information from that. And
but let's say your wife, she's not going to cheat on you again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm presuming unless he changes the term limits. If I did vote for Trump, then obviously I'm not going to vote for him again. He's not going to run again.
Yeah.
So your wife's not going to cheat on you again. So it's not going to change her behavior.
Agreed.
Okay. So do you want you can live your rest of your life?
I think I got a rate from Jola. Jola, thank you so much. We're going to talk soon. Sorry, I've been super busy, so appreciate you, Jola. Thanks very much. Everyone, stay chill.
It could have been someone with your family, Pisco. She could have cheated with.
See, I think I want the truth. I think I wouldn't be.
Pisco could have been your brother.
I think I want the truth. Now, if it's like Thanos or Hitler, if I know in advance who it would have to be for whom it would be revealed, maybe I'd have a different answer. But if I'm just thinking about like the average person it might be, I think I want the truth. What about you? Okay. What would you want?
Yeah, I probably would want the truth too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who'd you vote for?
Oh, I voted for Trump.
You, dude. What's wrong with you? Don't you love this country?
And I voted for him knowing like all of these crazy things were going to happen, by the way.
And you stand by it.
Yeah.
I mean, how dare you? What the?
I know. Terrible.
What's the rationale?
Well, the rationale is we can have that conversation. I don't know if we have 12:30 a.m. and I have work in the morning.
Yeah, okay. So I won't challenge you on it, but I just want to hear it.
Yeah, no. The rationale. Okay, so the biggest thing for me was the treatment of Israel, and by extension to that, our treatment of how we relate to terrorism broadly. My view on terrorism broadly is I think they need to get nothing but the full same treatment. I don't actually like the way Trump is engaging with terrorism as well, because I think he actually is negotiating with it. But I do think he's closer to my position on the treatment of terrorism, the existential threat of terrorism, than what Biden was. I think that Biden has royally cucked Israel, maybe not to the degree that Trump is cucking Ukraine, but I do think that Ukraine has allies, at least in Europe, that Israel does not. And I think Biden has very much set a standard compared to. I'm not saying that Trump hasn't done many of these things as well, but Biden has set a humanitarian cuck standard that rewards terrorists in a way that just seems incredibly dangerous to me. And that at least Trump, while he is not shaping up to exactly what I wanted him to be, at least he has had some fresh air of the type of at least rhetoric that I'd like to see a single president have, any president have for terrorists, which is the full SAM treatment, which is, and we can go into why I think that is like a very crucial thing for the survival of civilization in the long run. This is go ahead.
You go first. Sorry.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is like I had no doubts that I was voting for a madman. Like there were no. The one thing that I did hope for, and I do think is happening to some degree, is that we have enough institutions in our system that although crazy things would happen, we have enough things in our institution that there is some sort of reining in for the madman that happened last Trump administration and are to some degree are happening this Trump administration. So, for example, you will see a lot of rhetoric about tariffs, but then when you actually get to the nitty-gritty of what the tariffs are actually covering, a lot of it is a virtue signal. And then you'll see rhetorics about, these H-1B, eventually it's like H-1B visa stuff. But then when he gets to the point where he realizes his administration saying, okay, well, actually, we can't destroy the economy, all of a sudden you get the rhetoric about, oh, I was for H-1B visas all along. So there's this effect. And same thing with even RFK, like not jobs like RFK. He was so anti-vax, and now he's trying to sell himself as like, okay, I wasn't really that anti-vax, guys. Come on. I support
And you believe him?
Vaccine. No, I don't believe. No, I don't believe him. What I think is happening is I don't need to believe him. What I need to know is that what is happening is that he has. Obviously, I don't believe him that he was always pro-vaccine. What I do believe is happening is that he's meeting. There's an effect of getting into the White House. There's a difference between being on your own and being a lunatic, versus being a lunatic in the White House and then meeting sane people who are advising you and being like, hey, listen, you actually can't do this. Like, this will destroy everything, and here's why. And being like, and eventually just hitting them like, okay, I need to like, wait a minute, maybe I can't do this. I need to like find a way of like moderating my position, but still signaling to my supporters that like, or balancing those concerns. And I think we're seeing some of that effect. I think these people are really crazy, but they're getting a little bit of a hit of reality just by being in that position of power and being like, okay, and having all of their administration giving them like some semblance of reality and being like, oh, wait a minute, I actually can't f the entire economy and just get away with that, LOL. I actually can't destroy all of medicine, LOL. Maybe I should just signal to my supporters that I switched out the seed oils for the French fries with tallow, like what RFK recently tweeted. Like, great job, good job, make America healthy again. Or maybe I'll switch out the sugar, or maybe I'll put sugar cane instead of high fructose corn syrup. Maybe I could signal to Maha for that instead of. And funnily enough, Ozempic is left alone, and Manjaro is left alone, and vaccines are not illegal, and all of those things that RFK was selling himself on. Now time. He's going on. Yeah, now give it time. But what I'm seeing now is that he's being put on these little useless tasks that are going to appease the Maha crew, but ultimately won't do much of anything. And as long as he's doing that, I think that's the effect, that's the hope. And so far that seems to be panning out, and just like it panned out to the previous administration, that is apocalyptic as some of these things have seemed. It turns out that there is this effect that when you actually get into an administration and you have experts who actually know what they're talking about advising you, you can't actually just destroy the world. Or at least you have a lot lower probability of doing that.
I think we should have a longer conversation about this. I guess I have one question. Yeah. If it turned out that we stopped having free and fair elections, or if Trump clearly violated the Constitution and attempted and succeeded at getting a third term, would you admit that you made a mistake?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we should have a longer conversation at some point. I just see it so differently. I truly view what's happening in the administration as so apocalyptic right now. It's so horrible, so horrific. And I think everything you're saying about terrorism is equal and opposite with respect to great power politics and Russia. So, and encourage if you're
I know that is a counter. I will agree that's a countervailing concern. We could get into why I think it's a worse concern for non-state actors than state. I still think it's all things equal. It's a stronger concern for non-state actors than state actors. But that's something we can. But I will grant. Yeah, I will grant that that yes, there are absolutely countervailing concerns for states that act crazy, in the sense that Trump is going to appease Russia in ways that Biden would not have. Yes.
And you would support a war with Iran?
Would I support a war? Well, it's not every war. It depends what kind of war we're talking about.
A regime change war funded by America, led with boots on the ground with Israel.
Led on boots on the ground with... well, I guess potentially. It would depend on what particular information we have on Iran. If we have in terms of their nuclear... I would have to dial more empirics into that question to be able to answer that. Like, what is the perceived threat and whatnot, and what, like, are we going to have what's the perceived threat of Russia in response to that? Are we going to start World War III? Are we going to because I don't want to do any of those things. I don't want to destabilize the out of things that way. But if we dial in empirics that we've actually placated Russia, or we've assess that they're not going to start nuking us in response or shit like that we're not going to start World War III. It really is just these crazy mullahs in Iran. and who are just oppressing their people, and it would be a very if
Costly.
it really were an opportune time at a very low favorable time of the regime in the populace, where they are at a low point in their favorability, the highest point in terms of getting the populace on your side, to be able to quickly initiate a regime change swiftly. If all of those things were in place, then yeah, there are certain scenarios where I would support a regime change war.
Last question, and I'll let you go because I know it's late, and it's late for me too. What do you think about Trump negotiating behind the scenes with Hamas directly? Biden never did that.
Guy. Yeah. So I don't know if Trump is negotiating behind this. I have to know more about this. I understand that Adam, Adam guy, Adam Ball. How do I pronounce his last name? 1 second. Adam Bowler. Bowler? Is it Bowler? Anyway, he's the U.S. envoy for the hostages. So he has gone and negotiated behind Israel's back.
Bibi was pissed, they say.
Yes. No. Probably would. I probably would be as well. He has gone behind Israel's back and negotiated. And it's also in contention, the degree and extent of what he was negotiating may have been beyond what Trump has told him to negotiate. So he may have entertained certain, I don't know if this is true or not, but I know this is what's alleged, that he has entertained things that are beyond the Trump proposal with them. Now,
so you wouldn't blame Trump for that, is what you're saying?
Well, that part I wouldn't. If he did go beyond what Trump has allowed him to do, I'm not going to blame Trump for unless he doesn't punish him for it or something.
He's not responsible for his personnel. I mean, he makes personnel decisions.
No, he is. Yeah. That's why I said if he doesn't punish him for that. But it depends how Trump responds. You're responsible for your subordinates, and how you handle that is going to be the determining factor. So I obviously am not supportive of that. No. Do I see that as egregious as the treatment from the Biden administration? Also, no.
I mean, Biden is the whole world. I just want to take a step back, and you tell me if you disagree. The whole world sees Biden as like wholesale embracing Israel and giving him like basically everything they want. I know you see it very differently, but
yes, I know.
You can't say that Biden was a hawk
they call him
Israel.
Genocide Joe. They absolutely call him Genocide Joe and everything. I know how the perception is. I have no qualms about the perception. In terms of this reality, like though, I have to say, like, look, I agree that Trump is like way worse than Biden on so many things. Like, you could just get if you were to give me a list and say like, okay, what is Trump worse than on Biden? I could give you like a full, like, I can keep going. We can go all night. But there was one issue where I think that was a gaslight, bro. This whole thing that Biden's gonna be better than Israel than Trump for Israel. Like, Trump is like,
who said that? Who argued that?
I'm not saying you argued that, but there were plenty of people who were. You know there were.
Well, here's how you could argue it. Here's how you could argue it. You could say something.
I know you could argue. I know you can make the argument. But you know what's so funny?
Go ahead, sir. You
know what's so funny? As soon as Trump won, you know what happened to all the people making those arguments? They were like, that not only did they shut up, they reverted positions and then laughed at those who voted Trump, because they were like, oh, haha, like they laughed at the pro-Palestine people who voted Trump. Like, haha, you see, hope you got what you wanted. Trump's better than Israel, haha. I'm like, bro, you were just making the argument to me that Trump was going to be worse than Israel.
Well, I can't speak to those guys. But what I can say is, like, I mean, do you like Netanyahu's administration?
No, I don't like Netanyahu's administration, not particularly.
There are some people who would argue, and I don't know that I would completely sign off on that. If what you mean by better for Israel is more willing to do anything that the current state of Israel wants, then yeah, I guess Trump is better for Israel. If what you mean by better for Israel is, mapping on some kind of intuition about long-term stable peace with a fucking plan, maybe you think that giving Bibi Netanyahu everything he wants practically all the time isn't the best solution for Israel under that metric.
No, I've heard that before. So it's not the position that just giving Bibi everything he wants is the best solution under that metric. It's just that I think that there are certain things that the Biden administration have withheld from the Israelis that I think were things they should have had. And I actually think, in terms of the Bibi thing, the criticism I have, just to be clear, the criticism I have for Bibi in terms of the handling of terrorism is not going to be on the side you think it is. I'm not criticizing Bibi from a liberal side. I'll be criticizing Bibi from a conservative side when it comes to that thing. So
you want to be more like Smotrich and Ben Gvir's and
not Smotrich, not Smotrich Ben Gvir, in the sense that, because that goes into other things of like Kahana stuff and like settler expansion of stuff. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm just talking about the way he prosecuted the war in Gaza.
He should have not listened to the humanitarian people, and he listened too much to.
He should have listened to them even less, but he should have. No, I mean, the big thing is he should have actually had more tangible plans. He should have held territory. He should have increased decrease the thresholds for risk in terms of letting soldiers go into tunnels, even though some of them were going to die. He should have taken broader steps in terms of ending the war quicker. And yes, absolutely should have ignored a whole bunch of humanitarian cuckoldry, even the little ones that he granted. So yes, it would have been my position would be to have be more brutal than Netanyahu, but to be quicker and have the war ended quicker as well. Again, my general position for terrorism broadly, not just for Israel, is going to be to full SAM it, to just in the sense of establishing a long-term precedent of, you will not be negotiated with, you will not be spoken to, you will not we will create every incentive to not reward this behavior, even if it comes at the cost of many lives of civilians and soldiers. We're creating a standard that you will gain nothing from engaging in terrorist activities. And the reason for that being how I view it as an existential threat as technology increases.
Question from Joanna in the chat. Under the brutal plan that you self-described brutal plan that you're proposing would be preferable, would you call that genocide?
Under the brutal plan that I'm describing? No, it wouldn't meet criteria for genocide. Of course not. Under standard terminology, under UN criteria, or under the Geneva Convention, or
under standard terminology.
Under standard terminology, no, because it wouldn't meet criteria for eliminating whole in part, the desire to eliminate, the intent to eliminate in whole or in part a group of people, in terms of that being the per se goal.
Because the goal would be,
or any of the per se goals. The goals will be a security concern. There will be people eliminated. Yes, people will be eliminated. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. But the reason for the motivation for their elimination won't be because they're a member of a given group. It'll just be because there is a security concern of a terrorist threat.
Got it. We should talk more about the Trump thing at some point.
Sure.
It wounds me, and it
I know. Listen, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Yeah. Sorry. I mean, look. Well, let me just ask you: are you happy you got the truth? Do you feel better
now? I kind of suspected anyway, and so it's not as. I don't think it's quite on all fours with the analogy of the cheating, since even when I asked I kind of assumed it.
But if suspected it anyway with the cheating?
Yeah, I think it would hit different than like purely out of the blue. Wouldn't you agree? Like a purely out of the blue, thought everything was fine.
Okay, so
this is me thinking like, I saw the panties, I smelled the perfume, and I saw like the lipstick on the collar, and then I come up to you and be like, Avi, you have something to tell me?
Yeah. So Pisco, how's your girlfriend doing?
She's great. She's wonderful.
Yeah. You like knowing the truth, right?
Of course I do.
Okay. You sure?
I love knowing the truth. I always want to know the truth. And I want to spread the truth. And the truth of the matter is, Avi, you for voting for Trump. And I don't know when we need to have a conversation. We might even have to have this in person at some point, because you're in the city.
All right.
So what I propose to you is, at some nondescript date when you're not busy, let's meet in person. Let's have an actual conversation in front of a camera or over dinner. Because, dude, I hate this.
Yeah.
But
I know you do.
But
I saw how sad you are on the stream when you realized Trump was going to win.
Yeah, bro. I think I was the first person to in the.
You were the first person to actually realize that. I don't know if everyone's just drunk or stoned or something. Yeah. I remember this. I'm like, and I was looking at him like, dude, you guys are getting destroyed right now. I'm like, and I'm like, oh, Pisco realizes it. He's the only one to realize it now. And he's so somber. Oh no.
Yeah, it was a tough night, man. Tough night. And yeah, I basically think, given my priors, I think you can understand why I'm taking this position.
I know.
Given my prior
Yeah.
that it's the entire country's at stake and our constitution's at stake. That's
Right, right. Well, let me ask you the reverse question
Yeah.
though. Like, let's say it turns out like, okay, we had a bunch of insane rhetoric and bunch of insane, like all this insane rhetoric shit that we expected this clown to give us. We had it all but at the end of the day, our institutions held up. We still have our, like, at the end of 4 years, we still have our constitution. We still have, there's no third term Trump. There's none of that stuff. Would that change your view? Because I would agree that if there's a third Trump presidency, if all that shit changes, like, I will agree, like, hey, look, I made a mistake.
Yeah, no, I think
I thought, yeah.
I think the harm's already been done. Now, whether or not
Mm-hmm.
it extends beyond Trump's presidency, so I'll give you one example to lam on. The pardoning of the Jan 6 terrorist insurrectionists is one of the most corrupt acts taken by any president in the history of the Union. It is absolutely unforgivable. It means, the justice system has been completely politicized. The Mayor Adams is just one distillation of it. Crime is essentially legal now. There's no expectation whatsoever that
I agree with all of this. I'm not disputing any of that.
how do you not give a more about what's happening here, where that's the whole way, the metric by which people get into power. And what you should be worried about is a leftist populace that you don't agree with, who wants to cut off all aid to Israel. All of a sudden, they have no check on themselves. I mean, it's a little short-sighted, I think, to be thinking.
I agree that. Yeah. Listen, I agree. Listen, my position on pardoning is I actually want to essentially do away with the pardon.
I agree.
I don't think presidents should be able to do pardons. Like, my problem is, I think once that's on the table, like, you like, this is the first thing I said when Biden pardoned his son. I'm like, listen,
I call that corrupt too.
you guys. I know, but I said, listen, like, this is inevitable. Like, you're an idiot if you thought he wouldn't. Like, you believed him when he said he wouldn't. He's a father and it's his son. Of course, he's going to pardon him. And by the way, if you don't like it, what you need to do is change the power that a president has in terms of pardoning.
I don't even. I don't buy that, because I think that I think Biden didn't have to do that. That in the past, yeah, we've had some other corrupt pardons. I'm not going to pretend that the pardon power. You're right. The pardon power has been used in a inappropriate manner for years, so he's not the first. But Biden's pardon was one of the worst, and until Trump did his pardons, and those they did not have to do that, and they're abuse of powers, and I think they're independently impeachable, and so yeah, I think it's so fucking horrible, and it's not a question. Just like, by example,
I agree. Just to be clear, I agree that Trump's pardoning was way worse than Biden's pardoning. Of course, I agree. The magnitude is not the same, obviously.
And I also want to say, like, the president also has power over, he has the official power, and this isn't power that's going to go away. He executes the law, and he ultimately is the power behind the Department of Justice, and that's probably not going to go away either. But that doesn't mean that Trump had to do this little quid pro quo with Mayor Adams. That shit is stinky as fuck, and it has completely eviscerated any. I mean, think about the DOJ career prosecutors all left saying quid pro quo. These are Scalia clerks. They're lifetime members of the Federalist Society. They're lifetime conservatives, and they're saying this stinks to high heaven. This is our own justice system. And as soon as those guardrails start to come down, and when you have attacks on speech as well that we're seeing now, this is the first example. All of a sudden, our society, our way of life starts to go, and we start to look more like Russia. I don't want to live in Russia.
Do you think at the end of these 4 years, do you think that we're going to be in a sort of post-Trump era, in the sense that we're going to be looking a whole lot more like Russia going forward after this?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Because yeah, I mean, so if that really turns out to be the case, then yeah, you might, I might just concede and be like, okay, well, I made a mistake here. My mitigating factor in doing this was that my reasoning was just like the previous Trump administration, where our institutions held up with this craziness, is that we would also have institutions that managed to hold up to his craziness, and we would come out of this once again the greatest country. And I still believe that, by the way. I still do think that.
Yeah, but you're like citing his advisors, who are all crazier than he is.
Well, no, his advisors are not all crazier than he is.
Most,
He's,
bro, Russ Vought. I think one of the
they
more
have-
sane
they-
ones is Rubio, and fuck Rubio.
wait, but all of those individuals have their own advisors, right? It's not like even RFK. Like RFK is not just merely advising Trump on
I
health
don't think
stuff.
that
Like,
they're
he has
islands unto
people under him.
themselves, but I think that personnel that they're picking people according to their
Yeah.
own desires.
No, they are.
and
I'm
whims.
not. No, of course. Yes.
Have
Well,
you seen
really
the White
connected
House press
to
releases?
loyalty.
Have you seen the White House
Yes,
like from the
loyalty.
official
I agree.
letterhead?
Listen, all the head honchos there are going to be. When I say advisors, I'm not talking about like the main people in those positions. I'm talking about the people who are advising them. I'm talking about the people who are under them or being like,
the deputies, they're all Project 2025 appointees. I mean, the person who did the Mayor Adams thing is the deputy AG.
Well, the reason I think this is because there is you have to see some mitigating factor here. You have to see the rhetoric that people like RFK were talking about vaccines and how they're trying to dial it back now. I mean, I don't believe them in terms of I really had this view all along, but they're clearly trying to dial things back.
They're running a new study on autism, right? They're running a new vaccine study. And
I'm sure they want to. Well, I don't know if they're running it. They espouse like a desire to do that. I don't know if
they canceled this like important meeting, I think, with the FDA on the flu vaccine, right, where they're supposed to plan out the variants.
I think that was part of the a broad 60-day thing. I don't think they specifically isolated out any vaccine for that. I think that was part of like a broad pause that they just wanted to review. We're going to review things. Not to say that makes it better, but I'm saying like it's not the case that they like specifically targeted a vaccine.
Okay,
but
if it becomes the case that we don't have up-to-date flu vaccines, this approved
by
no.
I just to be clear, I listen. I'm not. But even if that's all, like, I'm not. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that these things don't pose problems. I'm saying that there is a mitigating. You may not think that the mitigating component is enough, but if you don't see any mitigating difference between how these people were acting pre-office versus post-office, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there is something there. I mean, there's clearly like this. These people were, not to say this is a good bar, like it's a terrible bar, and that's why it should be very clear that there is something, because it was completely unhinged before. It was just like as unhinged as it is now. It was insane before. I mean, RFK used to be just there talking about AIDS denialism and how HIV wasn't the cause of AIDS. Like there were recorded speeches of him saying this.
I think we've just started seeing the kind of degeneracy from the administration. We're going to see worse and worse and worse. And I think everything that they've talked about with respect to centralizing the power is exactly what they're doing now. I mean, they're really attacking the courts. They're attacking Congress's ability to appropriate funds. They're doing everything the wrong way.
Let me ask you this ultimate question, then, Pisco. Let me ask you this. So what would it take for us to go 4 years after this, and for Trump's not in anymore, and for you to be like, okay, you know what, Avi, if I thought the apocalypse would come, but it turns out things were bad. I didn't like the administration. It was terrible. It was probably the worst one, but our country survived. Our Constitution survived. What kind of material conditions would it take for you to say that?
Yeah, I think. I think our Constitution surviving is the most likely outcome. The question you asked is, are we going to look more like Russia? I think the answer is yes. If I had to bet right now, I think majority chance we still have elections, majority chance we still have a constitution, and majority chance we're able to pull through with a Democratic candidate for president in 2028. And so I don't think that the most likely outcome is the destruction of our Constitution, but I think that one thing that we've already had is a destruction of norms in our institutions that's already occurred, and that's occurred within the Justice Department. That's occurred within the executive's role in just breaking down these barriers within.
Right, so subsume all that piece.
Yeah,
like,
so,
what would
so
you
what
say?
I need to see is for us to transition into a new Democratic administration, for us to unwind all of the overreach that the Trump administration has done already, and for people to start to respect those norms, and for for us to have a reasonable thought process that in the future the parties are going to respect it. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that the Republican Party is now completely tainted and become the Trump Party. And so we're always now going to be, because of what Trump did, because of his victory, especially the second victory, Trump could have been discredited. Trump could have lost, and Trumpism would have lost in that case, 3 general elections in a row. And then we might have had a chance to discredit the Trump movement and say, hey, you can't win. You can't win these national elections with the Trump candidate anymore. But he's been emboldened. And now, you're asking me what it would take. It would take a kind of like restoration, I think, of the Republican Party. But so long as Trumpism has been, given victories and vindicated in terms of their electoral outcomes, I think it's a very unlikely that we're not going to be oscillating between the only sane party in the country.
So basically, like if Donald Trump Jr. or whatever, one of the ran for try to get the Republican nominee and just got completely destroyed by someone like actually sane, like there was like this backlash or something, like that would be the sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think if the Republican Party was like, okay, this is done, we're done with this, and we need to move on. But I put that as a very low odds chance. I think that basically, I think it's more of a party issue with Trump now, and though it also is the legal authorities that he's citing and that kind of thing, not necessarily because a Democratic administration is going to follow that precedent, but because now they've set a precedent that future Republican administrations will follow. And so it's a really situation. And even a 20% chance for us to be Viktor Orban or to be Putin, to me, is like, it's just existential risk, bro. It's so beyond the pale. And I'm sorry, I care more about my life here, and maybe you'll have to school me on ethics here, and us being able to be able to help others. And it's kind of like put the kid's mask on after you put your own mask on, right? And I feel like America is now retreating from being the leader of the free world. Europe is having to pick up the slack. I mean, we're retreating on Ukraine. We're loosening our soft power in all these different countries because of what we're doing with USAID. We're making people can't trust us anymore, right? Like Canada hates us now, where they were very positive about America. Australia, they had just signed a nuclear sub deal called AUKUS with America, and I was very in support of that deal. Now I think Australia shouldn't trust America. Why should they trust America? Why should UK trust America? No one should trust America right now. And it has me in this feeling of like, we have lost so much soft power.
Clear, I don't disagree with anything you're saying right now.
But how can that be worth the marginal gains in Israel policy?
Well, it's not just Israel policy. It's broad. It's a broader treatment of terrorism. But that's a conversation for.
Okay, we'll get into it.
Just to be clear, like it's more. Israel is. So I agree. In terms of Israel, yes, but in terms of a more broader treatment of terrorism, not. I wish you would apply this to state actors as well. But in terms of the standards we need to set for how we interface with the threat of terrorism as its own existential threat, it was my main motivating drive. But yeah, I agree. Look, I agree with all the things you're saying. Like the treatment of Ukraine is absolutely horrible. The standards we're setting in terms of the free were horrible, and I also think that you've just completely missed the technology opportunity. In terms of Ukraine's drone technology, most people just have no idea, and I don't even think Trump knows or his administration knows, like what he's gaining out of this. It's not just his positional foothold in NATO or in terms of the Eastern threat. What he's also gaining is he's able to advance his military technology with technology sharing memorandums and agreements. Particularly with drone technology, we need drone technology, and Ukraine is innovating drone technology, and especially that the Russians are using it and they're gaining innovation.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. So I agree. That's a really good point. That's one of the reasons why I want to support Ukraine. I think you want to support Ukraine. I think you don't like what happens with Zelensky.
No, I don't.
Yeah. So I hear you there. Who do you think is a bigger threat, though? ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism, or the Russian Federation and China?
ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism long term. I think that generally speaking, state actors can be very evil, but in terms of ending civilization, I think they can be much more reasoned with. If you were to ask me in terms of as technology increases, as all of these entities have easier access to civilization-ending weapons, it more becomes a question of which one is crazy enough to use them. And I think as evil as some of these, they're all evil, but I think generally state actors are more reasonable or amenable to some sort of reason than non-state actor terrorist groups.
The fear is that nuclear weapons will become miniaturized and easy to produce?
Oh yes, as technology increases, I think eventually terrorists are going to have a more easy way of accessing civilization-ending weapons and deploying them to hit their targets. At least in the long run, as technology improves. This is why I think terrorism is going to be, as technology increases, time it goes, it's going to be a larger and larger existential threat, and I think we've drastically underestimated it. And the way that we are setting up our standards for interfacing with them via humanitarian cuckoldry and peacenik fairy tales is incentivizing them to their proliferation, is rewarding that scourge, whereas we really should be having a standard to just ultimately completely stomp it out anytime it rears its head, and to set standards that that sort of behavior will never benefit, even if it comes at a great cost. I think ultimately, as technology increases, like that is the sort of deciding factor, that bottleneck is going to be like, who's crazy enough to use it. And I think generally non-state actor terrorist groups are the real candidate there. I don't think Russia is. I think they're crazy, but I don't think they ultimately really want a nuclear war. But I could totally see certain crazy Islamic terrorist groups being like, "Oh, actually, it wouldn't be that bad if we had a nuclear war." Like like if ISIS were again, like, would I be surprised if ISIS turned out they really did want a nuclear war? No, I really wouldn't. Like, I could see that feeding into their ideology.
Okay, well. Let's put a pin in it. I know this is a really fascinating conversation, and I'm glad I had it. I kind of already suspected you were voting for Trump, so it doesn't really change that much about my thought of you. But I do want to.
Still love you, Pisco.
Yeah. I guess you're proof that I can still like Trump supporters. Love right now, I can't say love because. You made me
Am I the only
today.
one? Am I the only one you still like?
No, there's other people I like, but yeah, no, I appreciate the conversation a lot, and yeah, let's meet some time and let's talk about Trump some more, and I'm really curious on your terrorism take, and I'll come more prepared to discuss that.
Yes. Yeah, we can get into the empirics too, like as terrorist attacks over time, or different terrorist regions with different policies, and how they're like different exponential patterns of terrorist deaths over time, depending on what type of policy in which location we've used, like using the full SAM approach versus using the humanitarian cuckold approach, and what has led to terrorists proliferating versus not proliferating. That's all. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Send me your shit. But yeah, much love, and we'll talk soon. Okay. I know I said I wouldn't say love, but I said it. All right. Later.
There you go. Later. Bye.
Kill me. It's always fun talking to Dr. Avi. My hair is crazy right now. Jeez. But it's just wild, man. How do you vote for Trump? How do you vote for Trump being Avi? And like, he's like, yeah, I agree with you that he's a danger to democracy. I agree with you he's bad on Ukraine, Russia, and state warfare. I agree with you that he's bad on health. He's bad on economy. He's bad, but he's really good on terrorism. I just don't agree. He's not a dumb guy. That's the thing. Did you discuss his sane washing for Elon? Oh, we should definitely do that. Oh, fuck. I wish I asked him this. Wait, I'm going to ask him real quick. Oh, shit. Calling him. Yo, real quick. One more question.
You missed me.
Yeah. One more question, because fuck you. This is the question. Ready?
Yeah.
Palestinian protester in front of a Palestinian flag in New York looks to the crowd, says, "My heart goes out to you," and does the same exact salute that Elon Musk did twice in front of the Trump crowd. He does that. Two questions. One is, do you think the ADL would say that that's an unfortunate gesture? Or two, would you call it a Sieg Heil, or would you say that it's anti-Semitic?
Yeah. So if we dial in all the things that Elon Musk did before then, like, did you see that full video, by the way?
The full speech?
Yeah, well, the full thing in terms of how he was acting and everything, like he looked like he got on stage and he's going, "Oh," and he's like shaking his arms everywhere, like he's like,
yeah, I saw that part.
Autism mode or on drugs.
I can't represent to have seen the full of the thing, but I saw minutes of what occurred.
Yes, you saw how he like goes up on the stage and he's like, "Oh," and he's like throwing his arms around like a complete lunatic.
So
or dark.
okay, so then
completely
dial in
no
all those
self-awareness.
things
So
as
the
well.
Palestinian person does that too, right? The Palestinian person goes to the crowd, goes, oh, like completely just acts like a lunatic and acts like that sort of person with no self-awareness at all, and goes in to the front of the crowd with the Palestinian flag, puts their hand on their chest, and then puts their hand laterally out to the side, in terms of like, and then opens the palm laterally out to the side. And then it says their interpretation after the fact was that they were like giving their heart out to the audience or something.
My heart goes out
So
to you.
answer, yeah, exactly. And then does it again and again, like 3 times. Because I think Elon did it 3 times or something. So to your first question, would the ADL have made the statement that they made? Of course not, because the ADL is a biased organization, which I don't think anyone is hiding that, including the ADL. And they probably would be less charitable toward that Palestinian than they were toward Elon Musk. In terms of your question to me, would I take that to be what was it? What exactly was your
Anti-Semitic.
question?
I said the term I said was anti-Semitic.
Would that be an anti-Semitic like gesture or something? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think that's right.
No. I wouldn't take that to be doing the salute. There were 2 variants of the Nazi salute that, by the way, actual Nazis generally, with a few exceptions that I could point to, are one thing about like genuine neo-Nazis. They're actually, when they do a Nazi salute, they actually are very good at doing it with the appropriate historical, with the appropriate historical way of doing it. Like it's actually shockingly like it's like they really.
But what if Elon doesn't know that? I mean, that's one problem.
I understand. I understand. No, I understand. No, I don't think. I don't think. I would think in both cases, if like you dialed all the same thing. I don't think that Elon or this Nazi person, or sorry, this,
busted.
Yeah, there you go, the Freudian slip. No, but I don't think that this pro-Palestinian Nazi was actually would be doing a Nazi salute there. Even if they, and I don't think that they would be trying to do it and just not know how to do it, but just dialing or just trying to do it with enough historical inaccuracy to 4D chess their way into some sort of plausible deniability. What I would assume in both cases, or think in both cases, or at least most plausible, is that they have absolutely no self-awareness of how they look, and they're just.
Why didn't he say that it was unfortunate? Why didn't Elon like say, "I know how this looks, and it's not at all what I meant"?
Yeah, because once he admits, because there's a factor of like once you admit something, like once you admit anything, you're going to be like, there's going to be some group of people that are going to be piling on and be like, you should apologize. Then you should be. I think what he did was he sort of took the approach of that. Well, I think it's so ridiculous what you're saying. The gaslighting approach. Like, I think it's so ridiculous what you're saying that I'm not even going to entertain it.
Okay, but
like,
every single person who is not as read up on the legitimate, like everyone who sees that, that's what it looks like to normal people.
No, a lot of people did. Yeah, I absolutely understand that. And if you could make the case that the better thing to do would have been like, listen, now that I see how that looked, like, holy shit, like that was pretty bad. But I don't think that him deciding not to do that is a result is explained by him. Oh, I really meant to do that. Wink, wink. I think him deciding not to do that is just a decision that he's making because he thinks that is a better way out, to just make fun of it. Like, you're
what
so
about his support for the
ridiculous.
AFD, and what about Steve Bannon's
support for the AFD? From what I've seen, so I haven't looked into the AFD party or Steve Bannon's much. From what I have heard of it, doesn't look like it's a good thing. Seems pretty bad. I have to look in more closely before I make.
They're like Holocaust revisionists. They're like Holocaust.
Oh yeah, I don't see. That's the thing. I don't actually know what their position on. I didn't even know that. I haven't really.
Elon's going there and saying these are the people that need to lead Germany.
Yeah. So then I would say that that's not a good thing. Yeah, I would be against. Like, doesn't
that affect your prior? That's like one.
No, I would be. By the way, also just to be clear,
you don't like Elon.
I voted. By the way, I don't think I even knew that Elon was going to be in the administration when I did a mail-in ballot or something. So like if you're asking me like about Elon stuff, like I no, like I'll give you my honest answer. Like if the support for AFD, no, if everything you're saying is like I'll look into it and it turns out these like their official position is like Holocaust revisionism and everything. Yeah, no, like fuck that shit. And the other thing, like Steve Bannon, like I again, I don't know, I haven't looked into Steve Bannon, so this is
No, he did a Nazi salute as well, and I think you should look at it.
I think I saw his one also. He's like, I'm like,
he
I'm
knows,
say, like,
dude.
Are you just trying to mimic Elon now? Like, what are you doing?
Come on. Okay, this is the question. Is a separate question from you, Avi? When you ask your wife if she cheated on you, and she says, "I'm not going to justify that question with a response," what do you think?
She says, I'm not going to justify that question with a response. Yeah, so there's I mean, it depends on the context, but I think that my personal preference is I prefer it if my wife were just to outright say it. I could imagine that certain
No, I didn't ask your preference. I asked, what do you think?
Oh, what do I think? Yeah, and what I think would depend on who it is, who my wife is. Yeah, I don't. Okay, it's a hypothetical wife. I'm not currently married. Okay,
sorry.
Yes. So, but if it was, so I'm imagining like because there are certain wives who really would act that way, who really would say like, "Oh, like I'm not dignifying that answer to the question," and they would really mean it in the sense that they're not trying to dodge the question, like they're actually just the answer is a real no, and they're just insulted that it's being asked of them. But then there are other people who would be like, who would reply in the sense that, "Oh, like." I'm going to actually answer your question. I might be insulted by it, but I will tell you like yes or no. So
what's
it would depend on
if you had to guess, what's your intuition about most women? What would you
fuck, that is a very like, oh man, now you're asking me to stereotype.
I am.
Stereotype women too. Oh man, on live on stream and everything. My god. God damn you.
You're having fun. You're having fun.
All right. Yeah, I don't know. No, so I don't. My answer is I don't know. I really don't know.
Oh, wait,
I could see it going.
Let me adjust it and make it more fair for you. What do you think most people who heard that response would think about that hypothetical wife?
Yeah, in the cheating thing, it'd be like they probably would be an underlying concern there that the reason that is being said is because the answer is really yes, they did cheat, but they don't want to answer the question. I think a lot of people would have and resonate, and maybe even most people would resonate with that underlying concern, at least on some level.
Fun hypos from the chat. No,
what's up?
Fun hypos from the chat. I'm conscious of your time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have to.
No, you're saying there's another fun hypothetical?
No. I'm saying that was just some fun hypos from the chat.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I think that would be a concern. And look, I also think that to a very strong degree has happened with Elon Musk. I think that a lot of people, one of the things I remember is people being like, okay, well, why is he just taking this approach then? Why doesn't he just come out and say that, like, no?
Why doesn't he?
I'm not doing it. Yeah. No, I agree. And I've seen him reply with like emojis being like, and sort of like confirming
14 emojis, right? The 14.
No, like basically the what?
Because there's like some kind of message with the 14, I think, or there's some like Heil Hitler reference with the number of emojis or something.
Oh, really? Okay.
Someone showed that to me. Yeah, I'll send you a whole retrospective on it.
Yeah. So I mean, there's another possibility that he's just like not a Nazi, but just doing it to troll people. I don't know if that was the case in this case. But I do think that he's taking the wrong approach. I think he's like, if I were in his position, I would just come out and say like, wow, that was really just stupid way I looked there. I mean, I reject the accusation that I tried to do this or that I tried to make it look like that. But yeah, I mean, hey, look at me, like I goofed. Like I see how it looks now. That's the approach I would have taken.
I accidentally did something that looks like this. Hey.
No, I accidentally did something that looks like it. I purposely did something thinking it would look a certain way, and now that I look at it, it looks pretty shitty. That's the approach I would take. Well, you don't think that would be the approach to take if you did that?
Yeah, so I think that would be the approach that he should take. I'm not disagreeing with you, and I think you're right about that. It's not the approach he took, and I think that I read more into the AFD connection as well as his. That's
more interesting. I want to see. I think
Reuters too. He unbanned Nick Fuentes.
To be honest, though, I don't think that's motivated by anti-Semitism as much as other forms of potential racism. I'm not saying that makes it better. I'm just saying I could see I could see him resonating with the AFD in terms of more of like an anti-immigration stance, unless it's H-1B, of course. Than like him doing it because like, oh, I just need to find some anti-Semites to get along.
I feel like these excuses are never given for pro-Palestinian people.
It's not an excuse. Wait.
Or sorry, these rationales are not. There's the same courtesy is not extended to people who are pro-Palestinian. Often, although you specifically did to Cenk and to. Well, I don't think that you think Cenk or Hassan are anti-Semitic, do you? Or you wouldn't say that they are. Okay. Yeah.
No, I don't think Cenk is anti-Semitic. I don't know enough about Hassan. I do think Hassan is maybe a low-key terrorist simp in some ways, but I don't think he's like anti-Semitic in a pure sense. Like, oh, does he like hate Jews? No, I don't.
Got it. Hey, I love this. Let's do it again.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, man.
You got it.
I'm going to stop streaming now, but thank you so much for joining in for the after call.
Yeah, for sure.
Much love. Bye-bye.